Ohio Senator and Donald Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, went after ABC's Martha Raddatz on the Sunday morning show this week. Raddatz slammed Trump's claims that Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua is taking over Aurora, Colorado. She cited Aurora's Republican mayor, who dispelled the rumors, calling it, quote, grossly exaggerated.
Vance immediately went after Raddatz. Here's their testy exchange. Let's watch.
People are terrified by what has happened with some of these Venezuelan gangs.
Senator Vance, I'm going to stop you because I know exactly what happened.
Martha.
I'm going to stop you. The incidents were limited to a handful of apartment complexes, and the mayor said our dedicated police officers have acted on those concerns. A handful of problems.
Only, Martha, do you hear yourself? Only a handful of apartment complexes in America were taken over by Venezuelan gangs, and Donald Trump is the problem and not Kamala Harris's open border? Americans are so fed up with what's going on, and they have every right to be. And I really find this exchange, Martha, sort of interesting because you seem to be more focused with nitpicking everything that Donald Trump has said rather than acknowledging that apartment complexes in the United States of America are being taken over by violent gangs.
And CBZ Management, a management company that owned that property in Aurora, Colorado, I see has put out a statement on X saying that this is absolutely the situation. There's clear evidence. I'm reading from their statement. Many still deny the reality of the situation, sometimes using us as scapegoats. That's why we're no longer staying silent. Yes, gangs did take control of our apartment complexes in Aurora, Colorado, and the government did nothing. That is the real story.
I mean, is it the real story? They issued a statement. I don't know anything about this company, who owns them, what their political leanings are. Listen, things happen in apartment complexes. They happen all over the country. I love how the Trump-Vance ticket believes that anecdotes work for them when they're arguing something. For instance, when there are school shootings and kids illegally get guns from their parents. They're like, oh, well, that's an anecdote. It's not the common situation. You know, most gun owners are law-abiding citizens, which they are, by the way, but they don't want to see these anomalies and investigate them. Now, is there probably some sort of organized crime in some apartment complexes? Sure. Is it something that is taking over our country where Donald Trump thinks we should bring in the National Guard and the military to go after the, quote, enemies from within? I think that they're using this as a tactic to scare people in swing districts who, for the most part, in these swing states and swing districts, specifically in those blue states where they're trying to go after, win a few congressional seats, Republicans, they're trying to gin up the base. They're trying to make them feel like they're living in this scary society when crime is down across the country, and it has been down. There was a slight peak after the pandemic, but we are living in a country that is far safer than it was in the 90s when Donald Trump first started his attacks against people of color, and definitely the 80s and 70s. They just are looking for things to scare people.
Well, yes, crime is coming down from the pandemic highs in a lot of places, which is certainly a good thing. I do think politicians on both sides can exaggerate bad things that are going on. But look, the reality of this situation does seem to be, it looks to me like the media took this one very dismissively, putting it in the same bucket as people eating pets or whatever, where there is an underlying truth to gang activity in this apartment complex that was not taken seriously by the authorities. You can say that's anecdotal, although this seems somewhat well-sourced to me at this point. It is true. I absolutely reject the idea that anecdotes are only wielded in bad faith by Republicans. I mean, think how many abortion-related anecdotes we've had to reckon with from Democrats about how this life-saving procedure can't be performed because this one person couldn't get a doctor to do it because they misread the law, etc. This is something that commonly happens. Look, here's a situation where government did not address a violent gang taking over a apartment complex in America, and that is stunning and unacceptable to a lot of people. And yes, it is causing them to be more interested in the solutions for violent illegal immigration that Republicans and Donald Trump have, which every poll shows they are more trusted to handle this. I agree with you that this kind of describing the country language as all overrun by violent immigrants could certainly be taken too far. But I, too, like J.D. Vance, as soon as she says, Martha Raddatz says, well, but it was only one town, and it's only a couple of buildings. Well, that's a real problem to the people who live there.
It is a problem to the people who live there, and the authorities did go. And listen, we have a strong Border Patrol and ICE. They're not sitting on this. They're fully funded. What really gets me about this and why I'm concerned that the Harris campaign is not drilling down on this more, and they've actually sort of abandoned the immigration conversation a bit in states like Arizona, because for whatever reason, for the first time in history, it is not being discussed openly in Arizona, where historically every candidate who's run for Senate or Congress brings it up right away on both sides. What concerns me about that is they should really be honing in on how Donald Trump was the one who rejected immigration reform. It was his Congress, it was his Republicans, it was his conservatives who did not want a bipartisan immigration reform. And he does not have a solution. His solution, we should all be pausing today and realizing what he said. His solution was to have the military go after all of his enemies, whether they're the left, or they are the immigrants, any immigrants, and round them up. This is fascistic. This is authoritarian behavior. And you, of course, as a libertarian, I should be concerned, I assume, as well. This is unprecedented. He is literally saying he's going to bring in the National Guard, bring in the military, and suddenly, what, we're Venezuela? If we're still concerned with Venezuela, he sure seems to be mimicking them a bit right now.
I do not recall him saying that he was going to use the military to go after his political enemies. I think he said,
I will read the quote to you right now.
Criminals, the enemy
The radical
within.
left lunatics. I think the bigger problem are the people from within. We have some very bad people. We have some sick people. Radical left lunatics, he said on Maria Bartiromo's show. I think it should be very easily handled by, if necessary, National Guard or by the military, because they can't let it happen.
Yeah. There should be no military going after political enemies or opponents. What we are talking about here, what is popular among the American people, it was, in fact, during the summer of rioting, this was treated by the mainstream media as some fringe opinion, but most people agreed, if you looked at public opinion pollings, that the National Guard, if necessary, could be used to stop rioting and looting and that kind of things, which was motivated by leftist criminal justice, anti-police mentality. So I think that's what's being described there. Now, you're right that as a libertarian, I don't want the federal government necessarily to be the ones, the federal troops handling these things. I think a lot of the solutions proposed by the right on immigration and other subjects would be very expensive, and I don't want to create some new Patriot Act style door-to-door surveillance to check if you're an immigrant or not. But there will be public frustration if crime is not being addressed. There is public frustration, and it's not even political. It's whoever the leaders are, whoever the authorities are, they need to do a better job deterring crime, doing something about the disorder we see in our cities. That is something again, minorities want as well. It's not like some elite white people concern. The people who actually live in these communities are sick of dealing with it. It's people who are on the borders on the lower end of the economic income distribution who are most concerned about this because they're living through it, and more has to be done. Now, that doesn't mean some military run by Trump kind of thing. I would not be in support of that. I'm not a Trump supporter, frankly, because he had 4 years to address a lot of the problems with federal overreach, and he failed to do it. But this is why people still like him and why he very well might be the next president of the United States.
He's playing strongman. It's classic dictatorship, authoritarian playbook. We know, as you mentioned earlier, that crime is down. We both live in cities. We've seen how it's gone down. And it's definitely not what it was in the 80s and 90s when we really were dealing with a very difficult situation. I think that's what the Harris campaign really needs to hone in on, is countering the message, because right now Donald Trump is dominating the message, and he just keeps going further and further. To what point? I mean, they've talked about challenging the election. It's now a Republican stance that they're going to challenge the election no matter what. That is classic authoritarian behavior. And it is deeply concerning to me that this kind of rhetoric is being used to really push fear to its highest levels in this country, where no matter where we go in this election, you're going to see post-Trump, post-Harris, whoever it is, you're going to see a country at war with each other because they've been pushed fear through this extremist behavior, rhetoric on both sides.
Yeah, I just don't think it's. I don't think it's just the rhetoric. I do agree with you that some of the rhetoric on both sides, some of the rhetoric from J.D. Vance and Donald Trump is very heated. We don't hear as much, frankly, from Kamala Harris or Tim Walz as we do from J.D. Vance, because he's the only one of the four who consistently does tons of media interviews. And I certainly disagree with the way he characterizes some of the problems in America. But we're arguing about the size of the problems. It persuades no one. It doesn't help to pretend that the problems don't exist at all, which is, I think, frequently what we hear from our media class. But we got to leave it there. More rising to come. Stay tuned.